Welcome back to Watch the Breakdown, where you watch us break down the game. Derek Bodner, we have a friend here today from Sixers Beat, covers the 76ers, has written for a variety of platforms. Great to have you here. Great to have an expert on the 76ers. Celtics, Sixers is always a fun time. We get twice the action here. And the first game didn't disappoint, but I'll ask you first, since I'm just getting to know you here. I always like to get into why, the people I talk to on these different shows gravitated toward the teams that they did, became interested in covering those teams, came up, you've written for a variety of platforms in Philadelphia. For me, the Celtics, it was always the culture, 2014, the hustle, the tenacity they played with, the comebacks in a lot of those games in the early Brad Stevens era led me to cover the team. But for you, what got you interested in the 76ers and what kind of captivated you to cover about them?
I mean, I've lived in the Philadelphia area most of my life. So when I started writing about basketball, it was natural to debate and discuss them. I didn't grow up I didn't go to school for being a writer. I sort of just faked my way in. So it was just natural to talk about the hometown team. To be honest.
AI? I thought you were going to say AI.
Well, I mean, I certainly I was in high school and early college during the AI era. Certainly, I watched a lot of him for sure. But I mean, in terms of I'm a Philly guy. I follow all the Philly sports. It's just sort of the way it is.
Who's the most captivating Sixer you've followed, you've watched, you've covered to this point? Does Embiid get up there at this point now?
Embiid's up there, but it would certainly be AI. I mean, that guy had just a magnetic personality. Even just watching him play, the energy and the passion that he played with, and then also his. I mean, he was. It's sort of lost in today's NBA and today's just sort of sports media environment. There was as flawed as he was, there was a rawness to the way he expressed his emotion, and I think he was far and away the most captivating athlete um, in recent Sixers history. Embiid's great, but he's not. He's not in terms of just the sheer connection. He's not where AI is.
I think of the artistry of him too. AI, Mello, others of that era, Paul Pierce, they all kind of had this distinctive style that you recognize. And for
Sure.
the people who hate the game now, I don't hate the game now. I love the energy, I love the scoring, love the offense, the flow. But you do lose that distinctive style. And we're going to talk a lot about Joel Embiid here. We're going to watch a lot of what's made him an MVP candidate to start this year, but he's closest. There's probably a few in today's game, Damian Lillard for sure, Curry, who have a distinctive style that's going to stick out all the time. But Embiid, his post game, his ability to play inside out, that stuff, people aren't going to forget it. But we'll start here
Yeah, for sure.
with the jump ball, which is, I did not think was going to be the story of last night, but Marcus Smart said, go back and look at it. So this is what we're going to do. You don't think of this often, that refs, they got to throw these jump balls from time to time, and they always have to be perfect. And for the first time ever covering basketball, I heard a player complain that the jump ball was biased. And of course, it was Marcus Smart. So we'll take a look at this. I didn't see it, but I don't know. Let's see what you think about this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly towards Danny Green's side. Certainly a little, but I would bet that happens quite frequently. Like throwing a ball straight up probably doesn't happen all that often. But yeah, no, it drifted a little bit for sure, for sure.
It drifts yeah, it drifts. So, like, I don't know what the rule. Could they re-jump that? Could they? I don't know. I guess that it just does
I
happen
don't
and
know.
players don't call attention to it. But
Yeah,
3:07 left, 4-point game. It ends up being a bigger play than you would usually see out of a jump ball here.
yeah, yep.
All right. Jump ball decided. Marcus Smart had a point. He complained about quite a bit out of this one.
You
The
did.
Celtics didn't like the free throws. I think it was 15-0 advantage in the fourth quarter. So I did want to get back into Joel Embiid drawing crunch time free throws. This is one they actually reviewed here on Daniel Theis. I thought this was a good call.
Yeah,
But
when you lock
Marcus
arms like
Smart's,
that, you're gonna get called a lot.
yeah, that's what Marcus Smart said after the game. Flopping around is what.
Yeah, I mean, like when you get when two people lock arms like that, like it's going to get called. And frankly, I don't want to hear it from Marcus Smart about flopping because that dude is I mean, he's a self-admitted flopper. I think it was with Rachel Nichols a couple years ago where he sat down and goes, "Yeah, it's a flop." Like, yeah, it's like offensive players can draw a foul. I'm going to draw a foul too. So for him to complain about it, like, does Joel Embiid embellish a little bit? Sure, but you are not the messenger for that
No, for
discussion.
sure. And Daniel Theis, it's funny. Daniel Theis always ends up in these situations. We've seen him and Embiid go at it quite a bit the last few years. And when you have a guy who's probably, let's say 250, I think is Theis's listed weight, seems a little generous.
Yeah, well, even so, Embiid's got him by 40 to 50 pounds.
Yeah. So that's always been a physical matchup that Theis has had trouble keeping up with. How do you feel? So this is a thing in Boston, the war on Theis. You know, you have Brian Scalabrine talking about it on the broadcast now. I think last year he was one of the 10 most per minute foulers in the NBA.
Okay.
So he's definitely a fouler is how I've always seen it. Like he
Sure.
fouls a lot and he ends up in a lot of situations where you can say, oh, is that a good call? Is that not a good call? And it sort of developed this thing. There's a war on Theis. There's always bad calls going against him. And I've seen a few over the years, certainly, but I always go back to if you foul a lot, you're probably going to get called for some that aren't fouls too. And that goes back to Smart too. That's another guy who always ends up in these situations flopping. And when you put yourself in those positions a lot, you're going to be subject to some bad calls.
Yeah, and we sort of go through that with Dwight Howard here too. I would bet you Dwight probably fouls more per minute than Theis does. Especially a lot of these backup, big men who aren't necessarily in their roles because they're super skilled. Although I like Daniel Theis. But part of that is that you've got to be a high energy defensive anchor, or at least a guy who can orchestrate a defense a little bit. And it's prone to picking up fouls.
And he had a good game. He certainly was the Celtics' best option in this one, which was surprising. But what I find interesting about Embiid, and of course the fouls were the conversation, he gets 21 free throws, I believe, in this one. He puts himself in a great position, is what I always say, to get fouled. And this is something that he's done a little more frequently to start this year, and why he's been so dominant, it feels like, is he's going into the post, embracing contact. He's always done this, but he also has a great jump shot that he likes to rely on. He likes pulling up from three, from the mid-range. But what you see at the end of this game is when he plants himself in the post, gets in isolation, he can draw free throws again and again and again. So 21, it looks like a ton on paper, and especially when the other team has 0 in the fourth quarter, that's going to be a conversation. But what is it that gets Embiid to the free throw line, you think, as much as he does?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's very, when you reach your hand down, he's very good at the rip through to get your hand caught up in his and to get what is a legitimate foul, but a bit of a cheap foul. And I think that's probably where a lot of this discussion comes from. Like he is smart in an almost Harden-esque way for a big man to make sure that you make contact. And if your hands are out of position, he is going to do that. So the combination of just his sheer physicality, his sort of instinct and knowledge on how to draw fouls, and when defenders are in pretty compromised positions with their hands, all of that is pretty. I mean, it's just, and I mean the NBA has gone away from big men, so there just aren't that many big men who are capable of matching up with him in the post anyway. And that has all sort of just created a pretty good foul drawing machine. He's very, like, if you watch the way he I mean, like I said, the rip through he goes to constantly, and he will get your hand stuck in a spot where it's going to get a foul. I would be annoyed by it if I was another team, but it's a lot of them are legitimate calls. There is contact. He just takes advantage of it.
It wasn't the best pace game we've watched all season when it comes to calls.
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't great for. We'll see how Friday looks. So forget the fouls. I hate that conversation, but we had to do it with how much it got brought back. His passing is what sticks out to me this year.
Yep.
He's making great reads out of double teams. He's done a lot of this stuff, but I think what's key for him in his MVP case this year is that he's doing all of these things more consistently. And he only had 2 assists in this game, but they were both fairly impressive. to me. Double
Well,
comes
and a
this.
lot of these, this one, because I saw this one earlier, this is going to be a hockey assist where they get an open three. And
Yeah,
it's because of him. He'll never get that assist, but it's all because of him.
it all comes out of the flow of the
Yeah.
offense. So that wasn't one of the assists there. The two ones, one was kind of a dish to his left to Danny Green, which I believe is right here. A simple one here, but still a great play nonetheless. Gets into his post up on Thompson, and we'll talk about Thompson's defense in a bit, but not a ton of resistance there. Smart comes, Green right to his left, hits the three. What spacing's better this year for sure. You got a Green, you got Seth Curry, who did not play in this game. There's a lot more free space, guys who can hit off these kind of plays, which would help Embiid as well. But what else you seen in the offense that they're not elite offensively, but it feels like they've been a little better to start this year.
Yeah, this whole NBA is a weird year because people are in and out of lineups. You're playing some games with half your team, and you guys have gone through that as well. So some of these early season numbers are strange. But in terms of Embiid, I mean, the spacing is huge. Like the fact that you replaced, Josh Richardson and Al Horford, who I like, but who's not a high volume corner 3-point shooter, replacing them with, Danny Green and Seth Curry. And Seth Curry might be one of, if not the best catch and shoot shooters in the league. Those are massive upgrades. And now you got Shake Milton, who at this point last year wasn't in the rotation. So those three players are very good fits next to Embiid. And last year, I think you can make a very strong case that last year's Sixers team had more talent than this year's Sixers team, but they didn't fit their best player nearly as well. And I think that's helped him in terms of passing. Those double teams, and Boston was great at this in previous years. They wouldn't fully commit. They'd get like halfway between Embiid and their man, and they were comfortable doing that.
It's cheating. Yeah, they just cheat a little
because
bit.
they just weren't afraid of the Sixers shooters, and they felt like they could recover. And they could then play off of him and sometimes attack, sometimes not, sometimes dig down all the way and force a turnover, sometimes not. And Embiid's talked about this. He didn't have confidence that who he was going to kick out to was going to make the shot or even make the right play. And now he does. And he's just going in there with a plan of attack. Like in previous years, he reacted to double teams. Now when he has the ball, he's planning the pass. He's planning the kick out. He's planning where he wants the double team to come from much more than he was in previous years. It's just, I think this is one of the things where it's a combination of spacing around him and also it just clicking. And I think this is the one aspect of his game that hadn't clicked yet. And I think it's starting to now.
I can't wait to press play on this one. This was beautiful here. You forget a nice little dish to your left. Anyone can do that out of a double team. The guy comes from the left, dish to the left corner three. This was probably the best pass I've ever seen him make.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one where in previous years, he would get rid of balls too early. And I swear sometimes he would forget that he's 7'2" and he can lift the ball up and very few people are going to get to it. But like sometimes like right there where he's holding it, he's turning that ball over. He's calmed down a little bit, which is nice. He still almost fell out of bounds, but
and what I see too, I think on the last pass was there's some hesitation. You can't do a shot fake from here, but earlier the shot fake kind of pulls in the defense a little bit. And you see the Celtics, they're tilting to the left a little bit. You have the nice high screen from Simmons there that keeps Green away from Green, coincidentally there. And, that's the help of having a guy like Green. I wasn't sure that Green and Curry would change this team transformatively, especially because those aren't great defenders. Green's good, but Curry's not the best.
Well, and Green's not what he was 3 or 4 years ago even,
But they just had so little shooting that even just adding a little bit, and Curry's been a lot, but adding a little bit in Green, it just makes a world of a difference.
And it's not even just the sheer percentages, because like Al was a good shooter on the percentages, especially for a center. Josh, before he got here, was an acceptable shooter the previous 2 years, but it's the volume, it's the hesitation. Like there was so much, even when Al shot, there was hesitation in his shot. Even when Josh Richardson shot, first of all, in the beginning of the year, there was hesitation, but then he started missing. And then it was like pump fake, jab stick, couple of dribbles into a mid-range, and it's just the Sixers spacing just cratered. Because like I said earlier, like there was so many teams that they felt like even if they could always recover back to Josh Richardson. They don't feel like they can do that with Seth Curry and Danny Green.
So let's talk Ben Simmons. Most another captivating character. We could throw him up there in the list too of captivating Sixers. Then don't shoot, all that kind of stuff piles up against him. Feels like stuff gets in his head. Now all of a sudden you have trade talks enveloping the team. The Harden deal felt this close. If Houston wanted to do it, it felt like Simmons was going to be a rocket, and now he has to come back and fit in with the team and be a Sixer for the long term after this. And the stuff can fade, but as we saw with the Celtics and the Lakers during Anthony Davis talks, it can linger a little bit. But the fit is still the biggest question with him. I believe he's got a career low points per game. And there's always that talk of the fit with Embiid. Embiid's clearly the centerpiece of this team. Everything's going to be around him. So now it's, how does Simmons fit in around him? I think the Sixers coming into this game were outscoring opponents by 20 points with Embiid on the court. With Simmons on the court, it was net even. So they're not finding the best spots for him. But I look at a play like this, there is possible room to have two guys navigate the post. And Doc Rivers said before the game too, you can post up from both sides. There's enough room in the post for two guys, but it's not always the best way to run a modern offense. It works well here, but you don't see it consistently create plays like this.
And this one, it started off with Simmons in the post, but really it's a snug pick and roll. Yeah. And they do that so they can get that deep pick and roll where it's much harder for somebody to go under a screen because you're so close to the basket. So you saw there, they switched. When that happens, either Simmons has a slower guy you can take off the dribble, or Embiid has in this case, very much smaller guy that he can post up, and it works. But they do that so that it's a little tougher to go under the screen. And that's when they run Simmons in pick and roll, and they don't run a whole lot of pick and roll with Simmons. They like to do it in that snug
Why don't they do more?
Well, I mean, from the perimeter, it's really like it's tough when you can go so far under the screen like that.
Yeah.
But that's where they try to overcome it, is in a play like that.
Well, we know what he's good at. This was the play of the night. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, he can get out for sure. I mean, that was.
Did you know Korkmaz had that in him?
Well, he actually, if you go back and find on YouTube, he won a EuroLeague dunk competition in a Darth Vader costume. So he has some ups in the open court. He doesn't elevate all that well in traffic. But he can get up there in the break, yeah. And what I like about Korkmaz is, despite the fact that he is a deep bench player, 9th, 10th man on the team, he has a little bit of flair to him. Whether it's this reverse dunk, he loves it behind the back or through the legs or behind the back pass, probably more than he should. When he gets going, he can be fun, but when he's missing his shots, he can be not. Yeah, Simmons, I mean, it's been a tough year. Like, he had a knee injury that kept him out of the Boston series, obviously, last, what was that, summer? Was that fall? It's such a weird schedule.
Preseason, yeah.
Well, no, during the Celtics
series. Playoffs, yeah. He was
a very brief playoff series.
Yeah.
But he had that knee injury, which kept him out. That same knee kept him out of a game or two here, two games earlier in the season, maybe about 2 weeks ago. So it's bothering him a little bit. I think it's probably bothering him a little bit more than he's letting on. I think that's part of the reason why he is struggling the way he has. But I think he's also just not confident as a scorer right now. I mean, he gets into really good position on some of his drives, 5 feet from the basket, and he won't go up with it. And he's been struggling so far for sure.
And he had a tough time with Brown in this one. I'm not sure if this is the clip necessarily. No, Harris is on him here, but Brown has been rolling at a high rate to start this year. Getting off the dribble is the big thing for him. Scores through Dwight Howard here. He did a ton of great work in this game off the dribble and had a phenomenal game for 3 quarters. I thought he faded a little bit in the fourth and ends up with not the greatest shooting line, but he gave Simmons trouble for certain stretches of this one. He draws Harris here. Harris has covered Tatum with this team as well. It's always interesting. Who does Harris get? Who does Simmons get? Simmons isn't on the floor here, but for most of the game, Simmons was guarding Brown, and I'd call Simmons one of the 3 best defenders in the league, and Brown was able to get him. There was another play as well where he really crossed him up on the dribble and pulled up from 2. I think Brown's one of the best 2-point shooters in the league from the mid-range this year. So the layers of Brown's games just keep piling on each other. And
it's amazing. I remember watching him at Cal, and there's probably no player I've been more wrong on in the draft than Jaylen Brown. At Cal, he just looked like he had no idea what he was doing. And I think part of that was they had real bad floor spacing, and part of it, things just hadn't clicked. But he made so many bad decisions during his 1 year at college, and I was way off. Well, and to be honest, he's gotten so much better that it's tough to even know what the eval was. He's just improved by leaps and bounds. But yeah, Simmons definitely had a tough time defensively the other night. He hasn't looked the same defensively here over the last couple of games. I think part of that is the knee injury. He isn't changing direction. He isn't building up speed the way he previously was. And sometimes like you just have to like tip your hat to a good offensive player who's making plays too.
We're going to put in that Jaylen play after. I can't believe I didn't clip that one, but you know which one I'm talking about, the crossover pull
Yeah.
up. Great play. Another player who was able to break down Philly's defense here. Kemba Walker is back, looking phenomenal in the pick and roll, breaking down Philly's defense here. Most of the first half, he was a menace off the bounce. And his hesitation in the pick and roll, his timing and finding guys on that roll. He's not the best passer in the world, but what I'm seeing most from him in 2 games so far back from his knee treatment is he can generate an amazing pick and roll, both for himself off the shot, which has killed Philly's defense going back to the playoff series, but also getting guys on the short roll here and just opening up the offense altogether. They ended up putting 4 Sixers in the post here on this play.
Well, even going back to his Charlotte days, he's always killed the Sixers. I think he had 60 against them maybe 2 years ago, something like that.
It's because they drop. That's always been what they drop against them, and he's the best pull-up shooter you can imagine.
I mean, the Sixers are a little bit more aggressive in their pick and roll coverage this year, just a little bit more, not super aggressive. But I mean, when you're starting that pick and roll 27, 28 feet from the basket and you're playing Dwight Howard and Joel Embiid, like there's not that many options you have. Like you don't want it, like even right there, Embiid's not really in position.
I love Embiid getting pushed off right here.
Yeah.
Just getting sent flying back into the post.
But I mean, they've never really figured out the Kemba pick and he made some tough shots.
Yep.
Last night. So he's a tough guy to guard for sure.
Great to see him look this good.
And I mean, in here you've got Tyrese Maxey, a rookie. Like Kentucky didn't play against Kemba Walker's last year. It's just a little bit of adjustment for him. For sure.
Kemba has a great game. Minutes limit kills Boston in this one. Tatum's not out here. So I wasn't freaking out about this loss. Crunch time was tough. That Danny Green offensive rebound was a tough one to swallow. That got the second chance point down the stretch. But just overall good stuff here. I think Kemba unlocks Daniel Theis to a significant degree too. I love this feed from him here on the roll. Saw quite a bit of those. I believe Theis had upwards of 20 points in this one. And he's a tough guy to contain on that roll. I thought Dwight Howard got picked on a bit, not only by Kemba, but Jaylen Brown got him a few times on these pick and rolls too.
No, I mean, the Sixers defense, they started off the first 8 games or so. They were, I think, the number 1 ranked defense in the league. Then they went through some COVID spells where they lost a bunch of people. Embiid and Simmons went out with injuries, and they just haven't looked the same here in over the last 2 weeks. This was not a great performance by them from any stretch. Like you said, if Kemba's not on a minutes limit, forget about Tatum. They probably pulled that game out. So I think the Sixers have some work to do. I mean, Seth Curry is coming back for the next game. It sounds like I think he's upgraded to probable, and he will help them offensively, but he's not solving any of these problems. Defensively, they need to get back on the same page because they have not executed on that end here over the last 2 weeks for sure.
I think you said at the beginning of our segment here that doesn't feel like any team in the NBA right now likes their defense. No. So that makes everybody feel a little bit better. The Celtics haven't defended by any means to start this year. Again, last night, giving up 42 to Embiid, of course. But I look at Tristan Thompson, and you would think he would be a guy who would be able to command more resistance a little bit against an Embiid. And I don't love his positioning. Again, I don't think this play here was him breakdown. Kemba gets caught around, Embiid goes to set a screen that doesn't actually end up setting it, and they're just scrambling to find Harris at the last minute. But I look at the second play here that I have queued up, and you would think he'd just be able to stay with Embiid a little better, fronts him well. But this is where I see him getting caught again and again, contesting shots. Got killed by Durant to begin the season on switches like this. And he's so ground bound and doesn't have great height either that it feels like guys have a decent time if they just put a little body on him and get a shot over him. They can do it. And again, he had a hamstring injury. He's another guy who's coming back. So I'm not going to kill him right away, but I thought there would be more impact from him. Last night, I think he had 2 points, 5 fouls, and was a -12 against Embiid.
And I mean, Embiid, like we just focus so much on his post game. Like he's got really good touch from the mid range and a really high release.
Yeah.
And if you're a shorter player, like there's not too much you can do on that one. Um, he when he's got it going on, he's tough. I'm sure Daryl Morey would love to see him extend that out to the 3-point line a little more consistently. That mid range shot is probably not what an analytics guru is really looking
I
for.
love it though.
But Embiid is, I mean, Embiid's real good at it, and because he can draw a double team and his passing's better, it makes that calculus a little tougher.
That's Watch the Breakdown. He is Derek Bodner. You can listen to him weekly on Sixers Beat. Appreciate you being here. Read him on The Athletic as well. The Athletic feels like all the friends we roll through here coming from The Athletic. So subscriptions are well worth your price there. Thank you, Derek. We'll talk to you again in the playoffs, probably, I'd imagine.
I mean, 3 or 2 out of the last 3 years, so probably. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.